Think this is a wide tale of betrayal. It is not. Adria's cauldron revealed more than Demonsit showed a future she could not unsee. 20 years passed between vision and strike. Think this is a why. And cauldron the strike ants were lies in revealed what she knew. Unsee why sanctuary's rot was not a piracy to prevent, but a collapse to accelerate. She waited not out of hesitation, but calculation. Every year was a thread in the noose around Diablo's neck. Or was it her own? The cauldron's truth became a weapon not to scent the fall, but to shape who would rise from the ash. Steam curled from Adria's cauldron, thick with the stench of iron and burnt ozone. The visions burned, sanctuary spires crumbling, the worldstone's pulse faltering, not piracy, a blueprint. The Horadrim's 20-year hunt for the black soulstone was not defiancy, was obedience, a ritual to ready the stage. The worldstone, that anchor of order, was a cracked eggshell. Tie-rails shattering in Lord of Destruction wasn't salvation. It was the final keystroke. Every sealed gate, every sacrifice funneled toward this, the eternal conflict spilling unfiltered into sanctuary. The age of Horadrim wasn't a rebellion, it was an epilogue. And Adria, with her seer's eyes, watched the clock tick from the first doctor of demon blood to the last. Adria's cauldron did not lie, its depths showed her truths no seer could unsee. Sanctuary's bones were rotting. The worldstone's shattering had not freed the realm, it had unshackled its death throes. 3,000 years of Horadrim toil, Tyrell's stolen grace, the soulstone's brittle grip on Diablo's Roral were bandages on a festering wound. The cauldron's silence stretched 20 years, a pause between heartbeats. Why wait? Why let the lie linger? Because he is a crueler master than despair. Adria knew the price of that fragile peace was written in ash and bone. She saw the day the worldstone's shards would unravel the sky, the moment sanctuary's light would gutter like a candle in hell's breath. The Horadrim's final stand was not a victory, it was a requiem. And Adria, with her seer's eyes, had watched every note of it play. The 20-year wait was not a delay, it was the clock's final hand turning. When the cauldron's visions ended, the fall had already begun. The cauldron's smoke never lied. Adria stirred not chaos, but a puppeteer's script. Her visions in Act V were no accident, they were a blueprint, each flicker a calculated move in a game older than Sanctuary itself. She had served the prime evils since the first blood of Diablo's reign, her loyalties etched in the same black iron as the Hellforge. The 20-year silence was her design, each vision a step in the collapse. Each demon summoned a crack in the foundation, the Horadrim's founding, a checkmark on her list. Sanctuary's weakness was not a flaw. It was a wound she had nurtured, a rot accelerated by every ritual, every soul bound in her cauldron's steam. She did not predict the fall, she engineered it. The visions were a grim ledger, tallying the cost of every betrayal, every delayed war, every false he fed to the righteous. When the cauldron's fire dimmed in Act V, the final tally was clear. Diablo's return was not a possibility. It was an arithmetic certainty. The 20 years were not a pause. They were the final chapter of a story Adria had written in ash and blood. The Horadrim's blades, the hero's questsaw, were ink in her margin notes. The fall was not a storm. It was a debt collected. And Adria, her hands stained with the soot of 1,000 sacrifices, was the collector. The tribunal's verdict hung like a blade unsheathed. Tyrell's single vote did not save Sanctuary, it chained it to a gilded noose. Inarius, ever the architect of ruin, had already sown the seeds of decay. His worldstone did not merely dull the Nephilim, it carved their potential into ash, a slow erosion of divinity. The air in Pandemonium's iron hall still reeks of burnt incense and iron, where the sinner's pact was sealed with the scent of desperation. Adria, crouched in her shadowed alcove, stirred her cauldron not with heat but with calculation. Each vision she brewed was a thread pulled from the tapestry, unraveling the fragile threads Tyrell had preserved. The cauldron's hiss was a language only she understood, not piracy, nor something colder. A mirror held up to the tribunal's compromise, reflecting its rot. For 20 years, her whispers seeped into the cracks of Sanctuary's foundation. A seer's reputation, a few chosen vision salways, just enough to bend the weak, never enough to raise suspicion. The Horadrim's founding, a footnote in her design. By then, the rot had roots. The Worldstone's chains were iron in the blood of every Nephilim, their strength leached like marrow from bone. What kind of mercy spares a world only to starve it of its soul? Tyrael's vote was not salvation but a gambit, a delay in the face of Angiris' quiet war. And Adria, that patient vulture, turned the delay into a death sentence. She did not need to see the future Esh needed only to ensure it stumbled, to let the weight of the tribunal's cruelty crush what little he remained. The iron hall's cold still clings to her bones, its echoes are in every scream the cauldron swallows. Sanctuary's fall was no accident, it was a harvest. And Adria, her hands stained with the soot of 1,000 sacrifices, was the reaper. The cauldron's smoke curled like a piresi half-remembered. Adria did not merely see demons stirring, she saw a child's breath in a mortal's body. 20 years of whispered bargains, of blood spilled and souls bound, were not delays. They were stitches in a tapestry. Diablo, trapped in stone, became a god waiting in the womb. The Horadrim's triumph soulstones sealing the Trian was the first thread in his shroud. Aiden's face, cracked with ancient malice, pressed against Sarah's skin. Not a mistake, a harvest delayed, not denied. Adria's visions burned with this truth. Sanctuary's fall was the hourglass turning. Every sealed soulstone was a heartbeat counting down. The Horadrim, in their zeal, had forged the very forge where Diablo's return would be reforged. Lee's existence is the scar where the design bleeds into flesh. A vessel not of force, but of frailty conceived in the shadow of a soulstone's prison, cradled by the same hands that once raised incantations against her father. Adria's cauldron did not predict the future, it cultivated it. What is a soulstone but a seed? What is a child but a covenant? The Horadrim sealed gods but unchained a legacy. Sanctuary's walls, built to hold the void, now cradle the storm. And Adria, her eyes hollow as the stones she once guarded, watches the clockwork of her own undoing tick toward the moment Diablo's voice will stir in a daughter's sigh. Adria's body fell to the stone, her whispers curled through the cauldron's steam. How could a dead woman shape 2 decades of chaos? The answer festers in the gap between her breath and Tyrael's exodus. She saw not a future descent, but a tide no dam could hold. The visions were not warnings, they were elegies, each flicker of fire a verse in Sanctuary's requiem. The Horadrim's birth, 3,000 years before her bones turned to dust, was already an epilogue. She knew the Nephilim would shatter the seal, she knew the angels would flee. She knew the stones she guarded would crumble not by violence, but by time's indifferent hand. Her death was a lie the world needed to believe. For if the fall was certain, what courage could any hero muster? The cauldron's smoke was never hers, it was the air before the storm. And Adria, long silenced, still breathes in every crack that splits the sky. The smoke wasn't chaos, it was a sequence. Adria's visions mapped not warnings but steps. Each flicker in the cauldron's depths traced the erosion of Sanctuary's spine. She did not foresee ruin, she designed its blueprint, the weight. A season to let the Horadrim rot from within, their zeal calcifying into dogma. Let them chase shadows while the Worldstone's roots withered. Let Tyrael's hammer grow heavy, his doubt a crack in the foundation. When the Worldstone shattered, it was not salvation but the final tile flipped. Adria's hand, guiding Diablo's return through the very collapse shed predicted. Did she weep as the skies split? Or did she smile watching the storm shed brood? The Horadrim called her a pawn. They never saw the game, Shed already won when the first crack spread across the sky. Her visions were not piresis, they were instructions, and every year that passed was a line crossed, a deadline met. Sanctuary's fall was never an accident, it was an equation. And Adria, cold and patient, had solved it first. The chronicler's hand trembles from a truth etched into time's fractured weave. Sanctuary's hidden life was a wound dressed in illusion. The Worldstone's power did not shield it, delayed. A wound festers until the bandage rots. The dark exile's banishment was no victory. The prime evils thrived in the cracks, their whispers feeding the very stone that hid them. Adria saw this. Not as piresi but as inevitability, 20 years. A span of years long enough for he to root, for heroes to believe they shaped the story. But the equation was written in the Worldstone's blood. Every soulstone's glow, every seer's cry merely echoes of a collapse already unfolding, what now remains unseen. The chronicler dares not ask. The Horadrim's founding, their holy fire were these acts of defiance or obedience. The cycle is inescapable. Each fall rebuilds the prison, each prison births the key. Adria waited not to summon demons, but to witness the unraveling. Her cauldron mirrored no future. It reflected the weight of what was already breaking. Sanctuary's end was no accident, it was the answer. And the chronicler, like all who came before, now writes the same truth in ash. The Worldstone's fall was the first breath of a storm that never dies. Adria's cauldron seethed with more than blood. It held echoes of a verdict sealed in starlight. 20 years, a span measured in demon hunts and Worldstone fractures, yet in her gaze, it was a breath between sentences in a story already written. What if the tribunal's shadow stretched not just into the past, but the future? Tyrael's defiance spared Sanctuary, but what if Adria saw the cost etched in the very air she boiled? The Codex whispers of cycles, of choices that bind as tightly as chains. Where do the numbers align? Where do they lie? The chronicler's pen pauses here. Your turn, unravel the threads, the comments await your heresy. The Worldstone's shards still whisper. Adria stirred her cauldron's bile, not to summon, but to see Sanctuary's breath held for 20 years between Tyrael's hammer and the Horadrim's birth. What did the silence hide? The Codex turns. Beyond the broken stone, shadows pool where light never reached. And if this